Greetings and welcome back to room 303 and our talks with Walt. We now turn to poem number 24 of the 24 poems of inscriptions at the beginning of the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass. This poem is simply called Thou Reader, and the poem will finish with just 2 lines that are a remarkable little invitation. Now, again, I want to say out loud what I said when you were with me for all of the lectures of all of Homer's Iliad and Homer's Odyssey and Virgil's Aeneid and Dante's Divine Comedy and Paradise Lost of Milton. What did I say when we finally got to the very end? What I'm going to say now. Hey, congratulations. Now granted, we're not to fancy yet, the last poem of the deathbed edition. We got a ways to go. But think about it this way. The Tao Te Ching says that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And guess what? You're finishing the first step. So congratulations to you, and I want to welcome you to the last poem now, the inscription section. And with that in mind, if you haven't been following our stuff, we have a few assumptions. One is that you'll hit learnstrong.net, find that file that says Talks with Walt, and go to work with previous lectures, because to be reminded, we are in fact the stories we tell and retell, the stories we accept, the stories we reject. And here, we're going to have one last invitation to say, be a part of the story. Be a part of my story and our story, as Whitman will play the game. Our learning theory assumes that we're always trying to connect new information, old information in meaningful ways. The new NEW is the new KNEW. That's foundational to, I believe, reading Leaves of Grass. And I think it's foundational to reading any kind of great literature. Our annotative approach will ask, of course, what does the text say? Level 1, what does the text mean? Level 2, how can I relate to it in some way at level 3? Our big 5 assumptions, of course, here in 303 are that we're always asking what the text says about epistemology and knowledge, ontology and being, psychology and sociology, the study of individual and group minds, and then finally, of course, the question of theodicy. Not why did this happen to me, but rather, why did this happen for me? There will be an invitation here to take the pain and the suffering of the world and somehow make some meaning of it. Finally, we'll look at Whitman always in all of our texts from 5 perspectives. Whitman as person, Whitman as poet, Whitman as pedagogue, instructor, Whitman as politician, and then finally philosopher. Now the background information, as we always like to point out, for this one is, this was the final poem of Inscriptions Group, one of the 17 new poems in Leaves of Grass, 1881. It obviously is the question, why would Whitman feel, after a poem like Poets to Come and To You, that he would finish with Thou Reader? But I think there's some real good reasons why this poem is positioned here at the very end of Inscriptions. Let's talk about it after we read it. Thou Reader. Thou Reader, throbbest life and pride and love, the same as I. Therefore, for thee, the following chants. Now we're going to point out right away the use of the word thou and thee. Again, Whitman's Quaker background comes into play here. His reverence, the language that is very reverential, that will say, I'm going to show respect. Write that down. In Leaves of Grass, Whitman dances between being reverent and irreverent. But all the time, I will argue, he wants to show respect. In his inclusivist voice, he wants to show respect. So it is noticed, thou, reader. Then there is this interesting word, throbbest. Now the word throb is the word pulse. And we've already said in a number of lectures of earlier texts from inscriptions that that idea of the procreant urging kind of potentiality of nature, of democracy, of America, and obviously of the self-created project that was Whitman's project, there's this throbbing. Earlier in another poem it was thrill, here it's throbbing. And what is it that you're throbbing with? 3 things. Notice he loves his trinities, as his St. Augustine will always be ever present in his mind. Throb is what? Life and pride and love. That kind of juxtaposes from those 3 rights of Thomas Jefferson and the DOI, right? That is to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator, certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Notice how life, liberty, pursuit of happiness is somehow subsumed in life, pride, love. It's interesting how those 3 mirror each other in some ways. And then he'll say it, I am the same as you. in that regards. We all throb with three things: life, pride, and love. By the way, the word pride here is an interesting word. It doesn't mean conceit pride. It doesn't mean the satanic pride of Milton's Satan in Paradise Lost, but rather a pride as in a longing, a curiosity, a desire to know. Therefore, and this is of course the last line of inscriptions, this sets us up for the rest of our study of Leaves of Grass. It's almost like a rational argument for him, a logistical argument. Therefore, for thee, that is to say, this again, language of reverence, for thee, he says, the following chants. Now there's something really cool about the word following, because of course it means what's coming, but it also means join me. Notice how he can play games with the words like this. It's quite brilliant. And then as we pointed out already, the word chants, C-H-A-N-T-S. Now of course if you hear that word said aloud, you might think that it's C-H-A-N-C-E, as in give me a chance. That's what's brilliant about the word chants. It carries that melodic intent, but it also carries with it all of the potentialities of what's to come. In other words, join me, he says. In other words, talk with me. Talk with me in my poems, enjoying what it is that's happening. Why? Because, as he'll say in another poem, you exist. And the great play goes on. And you may add a verse. And when we get to that set of lines, we'll return back to remembering a set of lines like this. How do we finish now? Inscriptions and our annotative approach at 2a. We're all connected because we're all throbbing. Plato says, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting their own battle. Whitman would say, be kind to everyone you meet, because everyone you meet is throbbing with those three: life, pride, that notion of desire for love. It's interesting to mark every time the word love gets used in Leaves of Grass. I would challenge you to pay attention to it. Doesn't get said a lot. Go back in inscriptions in the poems, the 24 poems, and just circle the number of times he uses the word love. The L word doesn't get used a whole lot, and when it does, it has meaning for Whitman. At 2b, this is, of course, the language of reverence and respect, as we've said. At 3a, well, think about this, and this is why I think this poem is so important. We're going to put the invocation of the Muse right here at the end of inscriptions. It's reversed in some way, right, from our Homer and our Virgil and our Dante or our Milton, but it's definitely there. In other words, he is invoking not the Muse, but rather you are the Muse that he is invoking, which is pretty genius if you think about it. Whereas before, Homer will say to the gods, please inspire me with the information that I can share with humans. For Whitman, it's the inverse. He will call to you as the Muse so that you can be amused. It's genius. It's a genius way to end the inscriptions. I just want to point out the intentionality, the poetic intentionality of what is happening here at 2b. Finally, at 3a, it's an interesting question. To what degree do you really feel like you're throbbing with life, pride, and love? And if you're not throbbing with life, pride, and love, why not? I mean, you are here, and you do get to swing at the park for just a few hours, and then you got to go bye-bye to the van. You ain't met no 200-year-old people. And if that's true, then why is it that we don't reverence life more? And the opportunity of swinging more, I think that's part of the language of reverence with thou and thee. How about this one? Are you ready now, after your study of the 24 poems and inscriptions, to meet Walt in his first long poem of Leaves of Grass, starting from Paumanok? And we're going to talk about why we have this poem as a long poem, set before the much longer poem, Song of Myself. I think in many ways we're learning to read Walt Whitman by reading the 24 poems of inscription. All of our study now has led us to this moment, and I hope that this will be a moment that you will mark as we are enjoying, at least I hope so, our talks with Walt. Come back and we'll be ready to go to work with the first long poem of Leaves of Grass. Thank you.